academics and test scores are so important. So why is it so hard for Asian students, right? Because as we probably all know, like if you were to look at test score averages, or if you just look at like who tends to get the highest GPAs in many of the high schools in your areas, tends to be Asian students. But why is it still so hard? Why aren't these schools like 40 or 50% Asian, right? And I think that's in large part because with just the sheer number of Asian students applying to the same schools, that creates kind of like competition amongst Asian students applying for those same types of schools, right? The other thing too is that these schools typically also, while they do want the best and the brightest for their fields, they have so many talented applicants that they do have other priorities that they want to kind of like take advantage of or prioritize, right? So one of these is, of course, diversity, right? So these top universities like the Ivy League schools, they do have a preference for having a much more diverse class, like socioeconomically, culturally, racially, just because they feel like students can learn more from interacting with people from different races, right? While that in and of itself is true, there is value in that. Unfortunately, it comes at the expense of, having to prioritize a couple of other races does make it so it's harder for certain other races. And unfortunately, the students that are then receiving the bad end of that stick is going to be Asian Americans, just because like the philosophy of a lot of these top schools is that there's so many Asian Americans who are applying, but relative to the entire nation's population, which Asians are probably like 5 or 6% of the entire US population, Asians are deemed to be overrepresented for these top schools. Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk about in this seminar then is what kinds of things can you do or can your kids do to make yourself stand out, to fall less victim to some of these stereotypes, I guess, some of these negative stereotypes that admissions officers have about Asian students. So that's really what I want to discuss with you today. Okay. So first of all, this is a huge update. So just a couple of months ago, or just about a month ago or so, I guess to the day, the Supreme Court started hearing oral arguments for the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard case, and the equivalent case that deals with public universities, the Students for Fair Admissions versus the University of North Carolina. So the Supreme Court is hearing both these cases more or less simultaneously, right? So they started oral arguments around Halloween, I guess October 31st. And so they've been largely, hearing from representatives of both sides. As of right now, based on what I've heard from, we attended the NACAC seminar back in September, and from what we gleaned from one of the speakers is that this case can be determined at the very earliest, even as early as this coming February, but there should be an outcome, or the Supreme Court should rule on this case by June, no later than June 30th, right? So we will be able to find out whether or not the case is gonna, be ruled. Now, the reason why this is so important is that if these cases are heard, it could effectively strike down affirmative action, right? So this decades-long practice of schools using race as a preference, using race as a factor in admissions, will then be completely removed. These colleges then have to use what's called a race-neutral system of evaluating students. Okay, so several states, though, most notably Texas, California, and Michigan, have already had their public university systems go test, or not test blind, sorry, but race blind, right, or race neutral, right? So those of you in California right now, and those of you in Texas right now, that like, public universities like Berkeley, UCLA, or if you're in Texas, the UT Austin, for example, cannot use race as a factor, right? And so the idea here then is that if the Supreme Court rules against Harvard and against University of North Carolina, then every single university across the country will have to get rid of this policy. Okay, now I get asked the question a lot. Well, why private universities? Doesn't only apply to like public? Doesn't the government only have control over public universities? Well, no. Even private universities receive a ton of funding from the federal government, through financial aid. So unless these private universities wanted to risk not getting financial aid for their students, they still have to adhere to whatever ruling the courts have, right? So especially if you're an Asian American student or an Asian American, parent, I think this could actually be something that would, like allow you to have a better chance of getting into the top colleges. There are trade-offs, of course, right? So like, you may be going to a college that might be less racially diverse, but it certainly bodes well in terms of your own individual chances, right?